everyone, welcome to Drawing with T. My name's Tina. Today I thought we'd continue our summer theme and draw a seagull. I'm going to give him some kind of human features to make him more of a character, make him more fun. So let's get started. We're drawing in Procreate and we're going to create a new canvas. And we're going to make it 2500 pixels by 2500 pixels. Make sure you have pixels selected. Hit create. Let's get some inspiration for what our seagull kind of looks like. Just drag your browser over and let's type in seagulls. Let's see what we get. Images. Let's see. I definitely want one with the whole bird. These are kind of funny. Seagulls always seem like they're angry about something. Let's pick this one. It's a good shot of the whole body so I can get all the basic shapes. Okay, so we're going to start with a sketch. You can use any of the pencils. All of the brushes I'm using today are free brushes that come with Procreate. I just like to use the Procreate pencil. And you can pick a black. And let's get some basic shapes. So his head, kind of a oval here. And then there's kind of a trapezoid for his neck. And then a larger body. Let's shrink this down a little bit. We can go back in and add some more distinct lines here, a little darker. He's got some nice feathers that kind of stick out in the back here. His legs kind of have these knees almost. So there's kind of some knees happening. And I'm gonna over exaggerate the feet a little bit. When you're trying to make an animal look a little more humanized, more like a character, sometimes it helps to exaggerate their features. So I'm going to make his beak open. Let me shrink this down a little bit again. It's kind of like he's yelling about something. And his body a little bit bigger. So there's some darker feathers that are kind of happening back here. Okay, so I'm going to add a wing here, and a different color, kind of comes down. Now I want his eyes to be more cartoony, so I'm gonna make it so we could see both of his eyes, and I'm gonna make him angry. He's yelling about something. I'm gonna see inside his mouth. I think it would be funny if the seagull was wearing goggles. Maybe give him some goggles. And how about a snorkel? Just to get an idea where everything is. So it doesn't look like he's having a good day. Okay. Let me adjust the size of this a little bit. No, I think he's going to be dripping wet. Let's make him just come out of the water. So let's draw some drips. There they would be. Maybe one coming off these feathers back here. And probably be standing in a puddle. And let's see, we'll add another drip here. Maybe one coming off the back over here. And let's draw one that just hit the puddle. So we get that kind of ripply action here. It's kind of like a cone of water that's splashing back up. Okay, so let's start blocking in our color. So I think we can get rid of our inspiration there a little bit. And I'm going to change the opacity of my sketch layer just to bring it down a little bit so we can still see it. We're going to create a new layer. We're going to put that under our sketch layer. Now I have a palette already created for this drawing. You can find the codes for all the colors in the description. So let's start with the beak color. I'm going to use this medium kind of yellow. And we are going to use, under inking, we're going to use this syrup brush to do all our color blocking. So let's start with the beak here. I think this beak kind of peeks up a little bit. And you can, if you've completed a shape, you can drag and drop your color right into it, and that will fill it all in. Okay. So let's go down to the feet because I'm going to use the same color for the feet, but I am going to put them on a different layer. So let's add a new layer. Kind of like how big his feet are. And let's add that knee. Try to drop that in. Okay, who knew seagulls had knees? Okay. So let's do his body, the main body, the white part. So we're gonna add a new layer. Now we're gonna make sure the body goes over the legs, but we want it to go under the beak. So I'm gonna select my beak layer and make sure that's over the body layer, this new layer. If you want, you can take the time to label all your layers to be more organized. So let's go into our palette here, and we're gonna pick this. It's got a tinge of blue in it, but it's almost white. And let's start blocking in his body. So you'll see we are drawing right over our leg layer, and we're drawing behind our beak. We're gonna have his wing go over that. Well, he's got some of these white feathers back here. And kind of peeking out in between this black area here. Okay, so let's do this darker gray next. Again, new layer. We're gonna make sure this is on top of the lighter body layer. And we are going to pick this same blue kind of, but it's a little darker, a little more gray. Kind of comes up a little bit. And I think there's going to be some feathery texture down here. Let's fill that in. Okay. So now let's add in our black feathers. Again, we're going to create a new layer. So we want this to go, let's do it, put it under the gray, but still over the white. And this whole time I'm still using that syrup brush to do my color blocking. Whoops. Let's pick our new color. I'm just going to do a solid black, pure black. Connect this a little more. Give it a little texture, make it look feathery. I think I'm gonna come over a little bit more. Okay. So we have all his basic body parts. Let's add his eyes. Again, new layer. And I'm just gonna use the black. And I'm just going to give him some solid black pupils and his angry eyebrows. Oops, that's a little thick. That's a little better. And we'll add a highlight into his eye. So just pick the white and we'll just add a little highlight in both of them. Like that. Okay. So let's work on the goggles next. New layer. So we want to make sure we're over the body, the head. And let's pick this nice green. So the frame of the goggles. Kind of just look like that. And then we have a strap coming back on his head. Kind of go past this head a little bit. And let's add the snorkel. I'm gonna do that in the same color. Just thicken this up a little bit. But I am gonna put it on a new layer because the snorkel is gonna go over it. And when I go back to add my shading, it will help to be able to shade this snorkel separately from the goggles. So new layer. Again, still using that syrup brush. And let's draw in our snorkel. Now it has that kind of mouthpiece that sticks out. Just fix the top here. Okay, that looks pretty fun. Okay, so let's do the water next. We're going to put this on a new layer. Now we gotta put the water all the way down below his feet because he's standing in the puddle. So we want the puddle to be behind his feet. So let's go and pick this nice blue color here. It's still kind of light. And let's draw in the puddle. I'm going to put the drops on a separate layer. So we're just doing the puddle. Fill that in. Okay. And let's do a new layer for the drips. And same color. I'm going to kind of move these around a little bit. So we'll put one there. Put a little one right here. Oh, this one's going to be coming off of his body. And let's have the one coming off his beak. Just making these nice teardrop shapes. And then I want to do this splashy one. Okay. So let's go back in and add our details and shading to take this up a notch. Let's start with his beak. So let's do the inside of his mouth. So we're going to create a new layer, make sure it's over the beak, and I'm going to pick this nice dark red color. color in. Okay, he's so angry. Okay, so let's do let's get rid of our sketch for the moment so I could see what's, I'm just gonna turn the sketch off temporarily. I'm gonna clean up this side of the beak a little bit. It's bothering me a little bit. So I'm gonna go back to that original yellow, make sure I'm on the beak layer, and I just wanna straighten this out a little bit. Okay, so I'm on the beak layer. I'm going to add a new layer and we're going to do shading. So I am going to make this a clipping mask. This will allow me to, when I draw, it's only going to draw on the pixels that I've already created on this layer below that it's clipped to. So for the shading on the beak, we are going to go into airbrushing and we're going to select soft brush. So we're going to pick a darker yellow first. It's a little more saturated, a little darker. And we're just going to, it's a little big, let's bring down the size of that to like 50%. That's still a little big. Let's try 30. Oops, I am changing the opacity. Let's undo that. Okay, sorry about that. Let's do 3%. You can change the opacity of the brush. That's what this slide does. Literally had a brain fart. Okay, so we're just darkening up this side. I'm picturing the light kind of coming down on top of him from this direction. So maybe it'll be dark kind of in his mouth around here. And up around this corner where the goggles are. And I'm just drawing very light just to add some subtle shading here. And maybe underneath the beak. Okay, so now let's go in and add the highlights. So I'm going to pick this lighter yellow. It's a little lighter, a little less saturated than that original one that we used for the color blocking. And wherever the light kind of hits, I'm just going to add a little more. Maybe it hits kind of down here a little bit too. I'm gonna go a little lighter, a little less saturated, just to really pop where the light is hitting. Just right at that top of the beak here. Okay. Okay. So let's go down to the feet while we're doing all these yellow colors. So again, I'm going to create a new layer and I'm going to make it a clipping mask. And I'm going to pick this darker yellow, but I'm going to go back to my syrup brush just to add these, I don't know what they're called, not his toes, but the ridge that would go across the top there, just in the darker color. Okay, so now we can go back to the airbrushing, the soft brush, and same dark yellow color. We can go where we would have shadows. So definitely under his belly, there would be a shadow, maybe along the back of his leg here, maybe on this side a little bit, maybe on this side a little bit. Kind of under his belly. And now let's pick that lighter color, because I think maybe the light's coming down, it might catch some of these ridges a little bit. So we'll just add a little lightness. These ridges. Okay. So next thing I want to do is, I think, his body, the white part of his body. So I'm going to first add some shading. So we're going to select the layer with the white part of his body, and we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to make this a clipping mask, and we're going to add just some shading with the soft brush. And I'm going to pick this very light gray. It's got, you know, some blue in it. It's just a little bit darker than what we already have here. And I'm going to, it's definitely going to be some shadow down here under his belly, be along these bottom feathers, I think back here behind his neck, under his beak a little bit. If you want to get really detailed, you can add a little bit under where the snorkel and his goggles kind of hit. Okay. Now we're going to add some fun texture. So I'm going to create a new layer, but I still want it to clip down to the body. So if you create a new layer right above this and hit clipping mask, you'll see that it creates a clipping mask, and it's actually clipped to this bottom layer. And whatever I draw is going to go above this other clipping mask, so keep that in mind. And that's what I want my texture to go over the shadow. And so I'm going to keep the same color, this lighter gray. And for my brush, I'm going to go under texture and under texture. Where is it? I thought it was under texture. Oh, I'm sorry. It's under painting. I want to pick stucco. So let's see how big. Let's start with, let's see what 20% does. And I'm just going to, I think that's a little too much. Let's try like 18. I'm just going to lightly go across his whole body. And you can see it creates this nice texture, and it reminds me of like his feathers, and they're kind of wet. It's a little too dark, but I do like the texture. So we're just going to go back into layers and just bring down the opacity a little bit. So you can still see the texture, but it's just a little subtle. Okay. So I'm liking how that looks. Now let's go to his wing. We are going to do another layer, and again make this a clipping mask. I am going to do this stucco texture on his wing as well. And I'm going to pick this slightly darker gray, since the wing's already darker. And let's see what that does. Okay. This kind of adds, I just feel like it looks like he's wet with this texture. But I am going to turn down the opacity a little bit because it is a little much. Just make it subtle. Like right around 68. And I'm going to, I'd like to make his wing look a little more feathery. So let's add a new layer. We're going to make this a clipping mask so that we're clipping to that original solid gray wing layer. And I am going to go under painting, and this time I'm going to pick, let's try the dry brush. And I'm going to pick this lighter gray. And we're just going to make some kind of streaks in here. Like that. Gives it a nice feathery kind of texture. Very painterly. I like the way that looks. Okay, so I'm thinking about the shadow on this body, and I'm thinking what would happen is we'd get some reflection off of the puddle, the blue. So I'd like to add a reflective shadow onto his belly. So I'm going to go back to my body and create a new layer. I'm going to put that, drag that above all the other clipped layers because I kind of want it to be on top. And you'll see it's clipped now. And we're going to, let's go underwater and pick wet sponge. So I'm going to pick this very light blue. And let's add some of this reflective very lightly. I'm going to go back and change the opacity. Let's bring that down a little bit. Pretty far. We want it to be just a subtle reflection of the color of that puddle. So let's do like 40%. Let's see. Yeah, so we get a nice reflective color bounce back onto his belly. Okay, let's see what I should do next. Let's work on the puddle. Now I want this to look more like water. So let's make some puddle marks here. So let's find our puddle. It's all the way down here. We're going to create a new layer, and we're going to make this a clipping mask. So we stay on there. And I'm going to choose, first let's add some dark shadow ripples. And for the brush, I'm going to go under inking, and we're going to pick ink bleed. And I'm just going to go around some of these edges and create these kind of ripple lines. And I think there would be some ripples where his feet are kind of rippling out here. And now let's go back in and pick this very light blue. Same brush, the ink bleed brush, and let's go and add some highlights. So the highlights are going to kind of pop up more around the edges here. Just to make it look a little more reflective, like water. Okay. So what I want to do now is, I still don't feel like this puddle looks watery enough. So let's go back and pick the original water layer, and we're going to stay on this layer, and we are going to use our smudge tool. Now when you click on the smudge tool, you can choose a brush to smudge in. And I am going to pick, let's see here. Let's go underwater and do water bleed. Yeah, let's try that. So let's see how this does. I'm just gonna follow my line here and kind of smudge it. So it just takes that sharp edge off. It makes it look a little feathery. Go around the whole puddle here. Okay, it's very subtle, but I think it just kind of makes it a little more watery looking. Okay, so let's do our drops now. So I'm going to go to the drop layer and I'm going to create a new layer and we'll make a clipping mask and we're going to add some highlights to our drops. And I'm going to first pick the darker color and we're going to go back to the ink bleed brush. So I'm going to kind of make some shadows here and we'll come back and do the highlights. And now for this splashy one here, going to add in our ripple here. I think I need to put my drops more over the puddle. Okay. Okay. And now let's go back in with the highlight. So I'm going to pick this very light blue and we're going to go and add the highlights to these strips. Okay. So that's where we're at now. Let's do, I feel like we need to add a shadow in the water. So what I'm going to do is I am going to, let's do an overlay. So we're going to do a new layer. We're going to put it, we're going to make sure it's, this could be a clipping mask, that'd be fine. And we're going to hit this end here and we're going to go down to overlay. And now we're going to pick black. And we're going to go into our airbrushing and pick the soft brush. And with the overlay, You'll see what happens. It just kind of darkens that blue color. I think I want to make my brush a little bit bigger. Let's do 6. Just add a nice shadow in here. And that kind of looks nice. Now I do want to, let's shrink this down a little bit. I want it to be darker right where his feet are kind of in the puddle. The shadow is always darkest where the two objects meet. Okay. So I'm happy with the way that puddle looks. So let's go back up to his face and work on, I think all that's left is our goggles and snorkel. So let's add some shading on the goggles. We're going to add a new layer and we're going to make that a clipping mask. And I'm going to pick this dark green and we're going to use the soft brush again. Now I have this all the way down at 2% because this is kind of a small area. So let's see, it would be darker on this side. It would be darker where the snorkel is kind of overlapping. And back here. Okay. Now let's go and add the highlights. So I'm going to pick this lighter green. And our light's coming this way, so it's going to be mostly right at this corner here. I'm going to pick even a lighter green and shrink this down to 1 or 2 and just add a nice highlight right in there, right where the light's catching it. Maybe there's a little light right there too. Okay, so let's kind of do the same shading on the snorkel. I'm going to add a new layer, clipping mask, pick the darker green. I'm just going to bump this up to 3, so it's going to be really dark back here. Maybe this is kind of under his beak. I'm gonna go back to the syrup brush real quick with this same dark green, and I'm going to make my hole at the top of the snorkel. And we'll go back to the airbrush to do our highlights. I'm gonna pick this lighter green. See where the light's hitting it. And pick the lightest green here, and just add like that. Okay, so I kind of want to make a lens on his goggles. So let's add a new layer, and I'm going to put this under the goggles. And we're going to pick this lightest blue. And let's actually pick this medium blue. And we're going to go back to our syrup brush because we're kind of blocking in this color. And I'm just going to fill this in. And then what we're going to do is change the opacity. So we can kind of see his eyes, but we still see that it's a lens in there. So let's do it like 60%. Now I do want to add some reflections in there, so you know it's kind of a window. So we're going to stay on this layer. We don't need to do a clipping mask. We're going to pick this lightest blue, and we're going to use the syrup. And let's just make some kind of streaks. Like that. Okay. I'm pretty happy with my seagull. Let's do a background. So I'm going to go all the way to the bottom and create a new layer. Make sure it's all the way underneath everything. And I'm going to pick this kind of purpley, pinkish, it's not very saturated. And let's see what brush we should use. I kind of like a painterly look, so let's go under painting, and I'm going to pick old brush, and we're just going to kind of, let me see, I think I need to shrink this down a little bit. Let me show you how to do that. So we need to basically select everything if we're going to resize everything at the same time. So if you just slide to the right, it will add that layer to your selection. And we're literally going to select every single layer. And then we're going to hit the arrow to resize, and then it just resizes everything. Let's kind of put him right in the center, so we have a nice border all the way around. That looks good. Okay. So let's go back down to that layer we just created all the way behind everything, and we're using the old brush. And I have it about 25%. Let's see. I'm just gonna start a circular kind of drawing out from the center. Make it a little bit more dense in the middle, and I kind of like how the edges of the circle are streaky. Doesn't have to be a perfect circle. Okay, so I like that. I like how it complements the blue and the green. So I do want to add some depth to it. So we're going to create a new layer. Over this layer, we're going to make it a clipping mask. Let's do airbrushing, soft brush, and we're going to make it a slightly darker, more saturated color. And I'm just going to, let's pick a bigger brush. Like 8 should do. And I'm just going to add a little bit under the puddle, just to make it pop more. Okay. So that looks pretty good. This seagull is pretty mad. What? I'm gonna add one more fun thing. So I'm gonna create a new layer. And let's add a little punch line. I'm going to use a calligraphy pencil chalk, and I'm going to pick that gray that was the color block for the wing and write a little punch line. What if he's saying something like, it's getting harder to find a good meal. So gonna follow the arc of this circle. I don't know, it's silly, but it's fun. It makes it more fun, and it gives you an idea what he's angry about. You know, you can choose to a different punchline or to leave out the text at all, but I just thought it'd be fun. So I think we can call this drawing complete. I hope you enjoyed this step-by-step tutorial, If so, please make sure to like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. I look forward to making more drawings with you. Thanks for watching. Bye!